Okie doke. So today it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Miss Cindy Bachofer as a part of this webinar series that is actually co-sponsored. This particular webinar is co-sponsored by Council for Exceptional Children, DVI-DB, the Division on Visual Impairment and Deafblindness, and the University of Pittsburgh. Our speaker today is Cindy Bachofer. Cindy is going to lead us in a very engaging 90 minutes where she talks about getting around and active travel. It's going to be a fantastic presentation, I know. Cindy is a teacher of students with visual impairments and a certified low vision therapist. She currently works at the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. She formerly was a teacher of students with visual impairments with Project PAVE, which is a project that was located at Vanderbilt University and focused on the needs of students with low vision and getting optical devices into their hands. She also did her doctoral work at Vanderbilt University, where her dissertation focused on factors that affect long-term optical device use. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Cindy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is a topic that I have become more and more passionate about, I'd say, in even just the past 5 years. That term active traveler, I think, rather than non-driver, is, I think, one indication of how the attitude towards transportation in our country is evolving, and I've been pleased to see that. Let's see, first off, I want to say the biggest thing, yes, I have slides and I'll be sharing, and there's information on those slides, but I think your questions, or if I'm not being clear on something, can you dig a little deeper in that, is really helpful to hear, because doing this over a screen is not nearly as much fun as being in the same room. And I understand when cameras are off, that's sometimes necessary, but hearing your questions and seeing faces of how this information is landing, is it making sense? Does it, resonate a spark with you, is very helpful. And I'll say, of course, I am one presenter, so this is coming from one perspective, but I've started doing this presentation 20 years ago and have talked with multiple other active travelers over the years. Even getting ready for this, I asked 3 coworkers on campus who are active travelers who don't drive, hey, talk to me about your perspective on this. So trying to pull in as many different ways of seeing this. So really getting your questions is going to be helpful for me. And then there will be a couple of polls and we'll ask you to chime in on a couple of things. So I am going to share screen. And it's showing, right? Tessa?
It is showing. We can see it.
Good. So the 3 main points I want to look at: development of strategies and that positive attitude, which I'd put that in bold, of a young active traveler. And whether your students are 3rd or 4th grade, 9th grader, or even if you're working with young adults, feeling confident in your strategies and having that positive attitude has become a really big topic with me. Even I'll think about, because one of my focuses is handheld optical devices. I used to just, it's skill, we've got to check on the skill, but that attitude in the head, that motivation, I think has to come before even the skill. So I think about that in most areas that we're working on with students. Then identification of specific skills and I'll use the label students, they may be clients, and then those responsibilities that come with me because I'm not at the wheel, but I still have responsibilities in the task of getting where I want to go. And then towards the end, it's more looking at, say, the 6 or 7 different modes of transportation that are most familiar or most available, I'd say. And yes, that varies definitely from rural area to urban, or larger cities to mid-sized cities, but looking at the range of options, and especially for me, where can we be developing lesson activities that come out of this transportation topic? Because I think for some of our students, they may qualify, and I can't go into the whole bioptic driving topic, but as someone with, and I'm speaking for those who have usable vision, have low vision, they may become bioptic drivers, but they may have a restricted license. They may choose not to drive in larger, really congested traffic cities. So having this in your back pocket of, I know how to still be independent, no matter if I'm at the wheel or not. And for students who may be blind or have additional disabilities or deafblind, some of this information applies to all of those populations. So we've got a poll question coming up, and Tessa will get to launch that. Considering the biggest barrier to becoming an active traveler for who you're working with. And we, if you had to, I pick one, I'm just curious what anyone attending, what they would say.
Cindy, just to check, you can see the poll results as they're coming in, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, cool.
Yep, yep. 2 of them seem to be front and center.
Cindy, this is Chris. Do you want us to add other things in chat as well?
Sure. I think that's helpful. We may just give it 5 more seconds. And I'll agree that reliance on parent, that is at 50% as your personal driver. And I'll mention this in other slides. That's natural for a parent. They do that, they're used to doing that. It's the pattern that's set up. But whether I'm talking with parents or students of how do we start easing off of that and switching from the adolescent or teenager, am going to take more responsibility with this. And then I think concerns of safety, that 2 points of, it feels like a more dangerous world now, and depending on the students' functioning and ability levels, making wise decisions may be in question, and an ability to do that. But at some level, starting on this, becoming more, bringing more self-determination into how I want to travel. What's my first choice? Do I get to decide the route? So, Ms. Tessa, do you get to end that poll?
Cindy, yeah, I'll end the poll. Were you able to see what came in the chat box?
No, it didn't pop up on my screen.
Okay, sure. So I'll read you what came in.
Okay.
Rural areas without much transportation.
Yep. I'm going to address that. Yep.
Someone said, I think an all the above would work well.
All of it is.
And financial concerns about students with credit cards can make using transportation network company options tough.
Read that one again.
Financial concerns about students with credit cards can
Credit
make
cards.
using transportation network company options tough, such
okay.
as Uber.
Yeah, okay. Because it can be too easy just to always automatically jump onto a Uber ride and then you're past your budget. Okay. I'm going to switch to the next slide. And the poll is still up there. I don't know, maybe I can. No. Are you in charge of that, Tess?
It's gone on my page. I stopped sharing.
Oh,
it.
okay. Oh, I had to exit off. It wasn't on mine. That's odd. So I'm going to kind of shifting towards heading out the door as an active traveler. This was, I can talk a little about my background. I have low vision. I consider it very usable vision. I meet the criteria to drive. I am on the borderline. I have no vision in one eye and I have some field loss in the other. I would need to use a bioptic, but I have chosen for the city that I'm in that is very congested and intense traffic, not to go that route. And so I am using multiple forms of transportation. And that has been definitely a skill set that has evolved. I used to live in Kansas, very different transportation options. And then when I moved to bigger cities, that was part of it. That was part of, I want more choices of transportation. And when I work with students, I hear them saying that a lot. Sometimes we'll get the student who says, no, I like living in the country. I like the rural aspect. But this heading out the door as an active traveler, I can remember attending multiple different sessions and kind of towards this topic or towards bioptic driving and hearing that's the only way you can be independent or have freedom is by being a driver. If you don't drive, then you don't have freedom or independence. And that really caused my spine to bristle because I think it's about perspective. It took me a while to shift my perspective with there is still independence, but I have to see it differently. And I think anybody who is a driver could say there are frustrations with being a driver. Let me just hear some. Anybody who's a driver. You can, everybody's unmuted.
Sorry, this is Chris. We got costs and repairs in the vehicle. You can't multitask. At least I can't very well while driving.
And we shouldn't be. That's where so many of the accidents are coming from.
Cindy, in the chat box from Francis Mary DeAndrea, you've got finding parking. I hate it. And as somebody who also lives in Pittsburgh with Francis Mary, finding parking is a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. And you avoid parts of town. I won't go to that area. We do in Austin. People won't go downtown because it's just so terrible and costly.
Driving in inclement weather.
Yep. And the stress that brings. So, you know, and I can do the flip side. For me, there are frustrations with being an active traveler. My feet hurt. The bus is late, carrying packages. And when I talk with students, it's no system is perfect. And I want them to recognize the pros and the cons. They hear their parents' voice, the expense, the stress just of commuting. But what I have on here is, you know, when I sat down and thought about what are some positive aspects of this, and the percentages that I have on this, it was interesting. And I think different communities are doing this where they're looking more at active transportation because during the COVID stretch, families were getting outside and walking more. So it's moved this to the forefront. but Austin, Texas Walk, Bike, and Roll is an initiative to get more walkable streets in our area. And so for people who responded to the poll, the leading one was, when I am being an active traveler, I am physical activity and I get health gains, 91%. It is environmentally friendly choice. And how many times a week are we seeing headlines coming out about climate change? And transportation, I think I read, contributes 30% to greenhouse effects and the demands that we're seeing through climate change. That community connections. And I can remember when I would walk through Nashville, especially, the number of times I wanted, pay me $1, the city of Nashville, because I am an ambassador for somebody. Hey, you probably know this area, you're walking. Can you tell me how to get to where to find? And then they say, once I gave the directions, those are really good directions because I'm using landmarks with big, bold colors, or, you know, like we would with our students. We're looking for that. What stands out that is going to help you get to where you want to be? The cost savings was 48% when you're doing this without being a driver or owning and operating a vehicle. And then choice of using commute time, where you can answer emails or text messages or even just reading. So if I think of these as the positives, on the bad days, when I get really frustrated with the buses not being on schedule, this can help. And then I think some of the things that come up, we have so few role models for our students who I didn't know anybody who didn't drive for a long time, because all the adults around me were, or my young adult friends were. So finding that role model and starting that discussion, that role model who is doing it effectively, safely, has a positive attitude about it. We now have just over a century of auto ownership. And in the US, that image of owning a vehicle is big. Starts early with kids getting Matchbox cars. So that is I think, an overarching attitude that we get to address with our students, and truly redefining what is spontaneity and convenience. If I have 2 to 3 different options of getting around, I can be spontaneous. It doesn't mean I can grab the keys and jump in the car, but I still am able to take control of how I'm getting around. And I'm throwing on a little humor in this, which I think is very important with active transportation. If you want to impress me with your vehicle, it better be a food truck. And I've got pictured here one of our most popular taco trucks in Austin that is funny to think about. Early steps in travel skills, and Chuck Huss is well recognized for working in the field of bioptic driving. And when we're looking at early travel skills, whether the person becomes a driver or not, and I think any comms in the room, this is familiar focus in O&M lessons, that we are working with the student to understand and follow multi-step route instructions. And that's within the school building. If a student is delivering a note to the office, if it's 3 turns to get to the office, even a second, third grader, they're starting, as an example of starting this early. Following a planned route, being able to reverse the route and say a janitor is cleaning up a mess in one of the hallways, can you find an alternate route? Then identify and respond to critical objects. So you think, what are the collision hazards on a path? So it's recognizing them as well as then how do I choose to maneuver around that? And then managing intersections. And I've got this may be familiar for anybody who's taken a defensive driving course. It's an acronym that gets used frequently in those. So just what Chuck's lesson or document was talking about, I'm identifying potential hazards, I'm predicting the issues and the consequences. An open doorway, a trash can, a whole group of students coming at me down a hallway, because I think some of those busy school hallways can be really demanding to navigate, and how effectively are our students doing it? Then deciding on my best route, my best action, and act on that. And then Ike Presley he's retired now, but Ike was a bioptic driver, but very aware of this active travel topic. And I liked in an AFB article that he had put together, when I am in a new area or I'm going to a new location, I can use, pull up GPS, anticipate, kind of preview my route, and use the street view if that's an option for a student. But I'll also call a business to try to double check myself and asking those kinds of questions. If I'm giving an intersection, in the area of the business, how many traffic lights? Are there landmarks at my turn? And is your business, rather than on the left or the right side of the street, using east and west? So developing awareness of those cardinal directions. And if I've gone too far, how do I know, so that whether I'm on the bus, whether I'm biking it, whether I'm in a Lyft, a ride share, that I have done my homework ahead of time to know my route. And when I'm talking with parents, especially, with both parents and students, this phrase, we're going to take the active passenger challenge, where so many times the student gets in a car, parent is driving, student is on their phone, head is down, they're not looking up and out, they're not aware of the businesses around them, the streets that they're crossing. I can kind of make fun of my nephew. Maybe he drove to his grandparents, my parents' house, for the first time on his own when he was 20, and he didn't know how to get there. He called his mom because he hadn't been paying attention. So getting that, we are, as a team, you are co-pilot and the pilot driver, where the student is becoming more aware of that. Setting up time to practice active travel safely. If a parent knows that they suspect that want their child to be developing these skills more, how are we working on it together? Riding the bus together at 15 or 16, because at that age, you can't be using Lyft solo, but with a parent, you're using that, because that option is becoming much more available, even in smaller cities. Working out that exchange route. If I'm taking you to the mall, what's the exchange on that? And I've had a strong reaction on that from different parents in the room of, that's my role, to be their driver. But that role is going to, it's probably for both of you, you'd agree that that role has to end. So just as we might reduce the amount of large print that a student is getting as they get closer and closer to high school graduation, how is the student becoming more independent in that? And falling back on that, it's a favor. my friend will take me where I need to go can become a negative pattern to get into. I think awareness of that, what is and cost, whether it's in time or money. So you're developing that awareness. I think as adults, when we're budgeting on groceries, we know that, but the same is true with travel. And I think drivers do it all the time. They're estimating this time of day, this is going to be the traffic level. How long is it going to take me to do that? So with active travel, doing the same thing with whether I'm on the bus, how long, or I choose to use a ride share. How long is it going to take for the ride share to get to me? Working up to that first solo trip, I think it starts small. We know that students I want to head over to my friend's house that's 2 blocks away. And a parent is going to, you work up to that goal. We're going to walk it together the first few times. I'll follow you further on when the student's a little older. So we're building that skill level. And then discussing parent support for travel expenses. If there's another sibling in the house that's driving, is the parent contributing a certain amount of financial support to that sibling? And then how does that parallel to the student who is not going to be a driver? So I'm going to pause for a minute and see if any other questions have come in. Or not necessarily in the chat, but I feel like I just said a whole lot that does it seem, does this match what your student is needing?
All very relevant and true, Cindy.
Thank you, Chris. And I think I said at the beginning, there can be a whole presentation on just the student who might be at a lower functioning level, a whole presentation on a deafblind traveler who is on academic grade level. There's multiple populations within this. So the next slide.
You do have one comment in the chat box. I'm just trying to keep you aware of what's there. It says,
Okay.
Yes, definitely relates to the ECC area of self-determination as well.
I think that really is, and I've not always had my best moments. Say if I'm traveling with my sister, 2 sisters, it feels like my voice is the least one in the car because I'm not a driver. We're going to decide what direction, what order the errands are in or where lunch is going to be. And I have had to work with myself on how do I put that forward with, hey guys, I have a vote here too. And, finding the respectful but self-determined way to believe I'm part of this travel group. So my vote here counts. So if you have a piece of paper.
Cindy, real fast, can you throw one more question at you?
Yeah.
That came up in the chat box. Besides the typical traveler safety in terms of orientation and mobility, what about safety when taking ride shares? Even those with typical vision have to be cautious. Are there strategies you've discussed with them to ensure that it's the right Uber and not another car?
Yeah, I have a ride share slide in a little bit, but I definitely agree, some common sense, double checking the car. We will talk about that. It took me over a year to build up the courage to get in a ride share. I thought, you people are crazy. Weren't we all taught you don't get in a stranger's car? And there are some safeguards. And I will say, I have felt safer in ride shares than I did in a lot of taxis I was in when I was doing taxis. But we have I think there are safeguards in place, and your phone is a really valuable tool along the way. So we'll have a little more discussion on that. So if you just quickly, because I'm going to ask, we'll have a poll. What do you think is the national average for owning and operating a vehicle? And this is a rough guess. You know, I don't want to stay on this slide for 4 or 5 minutes, but if you just did a ballpark, added up each of those items and divided by 12, what do you think the national average for owning and operating a vehicle? For a long time, I did not know this. I always made the example. Most drivers, they make it look so easy. Driving is a very demanding task. And I think I would get into somebody's car thinking this is easy for them. This isn't, you know, hard for them to go a few blocks out of their way to help me out. And that was a big learning step for me.
Okie doke. I think those are the results of your poll there, Cindy.
Okay. And the 900 per month is correct. National average, we know it can be lower than that, but even if it's 700 a month, that I was shocked at that. So it is an investment, and having a vehicle is clearly very important to people. More than the national average says, more than 75% of Americans are typically driving, routinely driving. So there's a portion of the country that isn't, but it's very important to do that. And I want students to be aware of what that cost is. And because I'm not paying that, then me choosing to, how many times am I going to take a ride share, that factors into my monthly budget, just like this does for a driver. So trying to see those parallels. We are both managing transportation. We're doing it differently. So another activity I do with students, and this was one of those things I learned along the way. I like doing this in a room full of students. So it's a Saturday. I'm going to say it's early October, and for Texas, we're still at 91, 92 degrees. Could be rainy. And I am doing a day full of errands. I am heading out at 9 o'clock between stop at the bank, hitting a couple stores for errand or items I'm wanting that I don't want to order through Amazon, meeting a friend for lunch, doing 2 grocery stores along the way because one of them has better produce than the other one. So it's a good 6-7 hours out. What do I put in my bag? Because when I get in somebody's vehicle, you can be really aware of what's on the floor, what's on the passenger seat, what's in the console in the middle. What would you think is essential to throw in the bag if I am using different modes of transportation on, say, 6 hours outside of the house? And you can throw it in the chat or just say it out loud on
I'll read
we're
what's
small enough.
coming in the chat. We've got water, phone.
First aid,
Okay. Like have Band-Aids or cream, ointment if you. Yep. Okay. And because those can be really small pouches.
Sunscreen, umbrella.
Yep. We're up to 5 items.
Cash, snack, backup phone battery, phone, AirPods. I'm gonna second snack. If you're gonna be out for 6 hours, you gotta have a snack.
I'll throw in a granola bar and sometimes a piece of fruit. And a true on, it's definitely increased the amount of technology we're carrying with either earbuds, power bank, phone itself.
You've got another comment, poncho maybe?
Yep, for rain or a poncho or umbrella. Come on, comms, help me out. What should be in the bag?
Any optical devices or canes that you need?
Yep, weather identity cane, and telescope if the student is using that, magnifier, handheld magnifier. Because if you're relying on your phone for all of it, I think that can get you into trouble. I had one person I was talking with last week said she compared the charge on her phone to the gas in your car, because that phone is getting me around. So I sometimes talk with students about being selective. So we can say your autumn, right now we're up to about 15 items.
We've got subway
Sometimes-
and bus pass or ticket.
And whether you keep it on your phone, again, if you're relying on that phone, you better be sure you have access to getting it charged. Or if you do, I still do a swipe pass. Sometimes the buses can be super cold because they have the AC up so much, a jack, you know, a shawl, a wrap. There
Sunglasses for glare, hat for glare.
Yep. Yes, sun SPF. So that demonstration of, and I'll sometimes time students like for 90 seconds. Let's see if we can get up to 20 items that you think are, that I'm going to have a more comfortable day if I am, out and about and have determined what I'm carrying for myself. Sometimes I've started this presentation with asking the question in a comparison way, why would somebody choose to be a vegetarian? In that same way, why would somebody choose to be an active traveler?
Healthier for you.
What was that?
It's healthier for you.
Can be healthier. Possibly better for the planet.
Cindy,
So-
just in case you don't see this one, Frances Mary wrote, "Animals are cute." Sorry, I just had me laughing on mute.
Yeah, the don't want, yeah, definitely. I don't want to eat an animal. And I think that's that, again, that this can be a choice. It can be a positive choice. So I've thrown out here a couple of scenarios with how do we help a student think about that? What kind of trip do I want to be taking? Within safe limits, approval of parents, we're working up to the necessary skills for that. So if you think of two 17-year-olds that they want to go to a film festival in San Antonio, that's about 90 minutes from Austin. And there are a couple of different ways they could get there. Greyhound goes there. I think a Megabus still does, because that goes between those two cities. Rideshare is in San Antonio, so they could load that app onto their phone. And I think 17-year-olds can do that. So they have figured out, how are we going to get where we need to go? Or if we even think of say a middle schooler, a 13-year-old, he wants to do a drum workshop in UT towards downtown Austin. Multiple buses go there. So if that kind of trip is set up, then how does the student get the information that they need? And then what items are they needing to think about before traveling? Because that critical thinking, I think, is always a part of travel lessons. What's your backup plan? What do you need? How are you being safe? And talking through these kinds of scenarios, I think, is an example of that. So how is life different when you are not at the wheel? And I think there are some this is just a starter list. I have a responsibility in helping to plan the ride and paying for the ride. If hiring a driver is an option that we haven't talked about yet, and on the times that I've been able to do that, it is as much my responsibility to weigh in on that. And sometimes I do with rideshare as well. What route does GPS have you going? Then figuring out the expense decision, and I heard somebody refer to it, is it time or is it my dime? Because there are quicker ways to get around, but they can be more expensive. The flexibility with change in the schedule. If the rideshare cancels on you, or the bus is late, or the friend who was going to pick me up, I'm waiting at the intersection that we agreed on. How am I using that wait time? I think is one of the big things I learned, for always have something in your bag that you can be working on if your plan goes off schedule, and having that backup plan. What's my second option for getting where I want to go?
Hey, Cindy, can I just share a real quick story related to that filling time when you're,
Yep.
I had a student several years ago at the university I was working at, and she always used paratransit. And as you know, with paratransit, you never really know if you're going to be late or early, or if you're going to be really early. And so she always kept manicure materials in her bag, and she had the best nails of anybody I know, because she would always use her time to redo her nails.
Excellent. And
really
it's personal,
smart.
Some people I'm watching a movie on my phone, or I'm answering texts, or I'm going to do a phone call. But knowing how can I bring down that frustration by still being productive? And she had a good, lovely fingernails for that. I was visiting with another coworker where we had, and I think this is an example of kind of critical thinking it through. Your decision maker on the, mine was the one on the left, determining my what mode of travel was I going to use? Because typically I'm either walk or the bus. And if it's there, I have 3 items on this triangle: wet, dark, and cold. If 2 of these are happening, I can go for my more expensive form of transportation. If it's wet and cold, or if it's dark and wet. But otherwise, I'm going to do the one that fits more within my budget, and is more the routine that I do. And the coworker had commented, her triangle is the amount of frustration, the cost, and then the amount of time. So she's kind of weighing those out for, if I need to get somewhere more quickly, then yes, I'm going to absorb the cost. If I just don't have the frustration bandwidth today, then that will help determine the mode of travel that I use. So in travel skills for students, I think again, this is just a beginning list. what we now have available, if we think how different this was just less than 15 years ago, how much all of us are reliant. How many people have a paper map in their vehicles anymore? Because it's either on the dashboard or your phone screen. But I still think orienting students to paper maps, because trying to do it on a phone screen can be really disorienting. And if they can have a sense of that larger view and then work down to the phone screen, I think makes sense. Even reading a timetable, whether it's on your phone screen and you're having to swipe or scroll, seeing one on a paper version might be a starting point. Of using optical devices to get the information you need. Getting travel directions was a big topic with a couple of the people I visited with, on knowing how to ask the right question to get the information you need. Knowing how to, if you've got a stranger on the bus who's being too friendly, how do you be firm and respectful still, not starting an issue, or asking somebody on a street corner for, can you point me in the right direction? So working with students on those social skills, building that communication, practicing problem solving. I think any times we can throw out scenarios. What would you do if this happened? And having the wait time for the student to answer, or talking through different options on that. And then choosing appropriate times for self-advocacy or assertiveness. You know, we always use the example of somebody, if they see you with a cane, they're going to grab your arm and let me take you across the street. And that's that being assertive with, I don't need to go across the street, or this is not the time I want to. So your offer of help is not what I'm after right now. And then I've added the keeping a sense of humor is become one of my biggest important skills, because there definitely are frustrations. No, neither of our systems is perfect. And I had a student, when we do our bioptic driving workshop, where our purpose in the workshop is not, it is about information gathering. It is not the, you will be a driver. And one of the students said, I'm waiting for the Google car. We know this is, it was supposed to be out by now, slower outcome on it than we've expected. But I know we're going to see big strides in the next 10 years, more self-driving autos. And I thought this picture from the 1950s was just too rich. So before we move, this is kind of the third part of the presentation on different options of transportation, the pros and cons. Any other questions or comments on this? As we opened with the positive attitude, developing a specific set of skills. And I think even doing that, finding an inventory of, or doing an assessment on a student, you know, being able to plan their route, reverse their route. What's my backup plan? This definitely within the comms role of managing intersections, but all the things we've talked about so far.
What about students who are completely unmotivated to be an independent traveler, or have any, you know, I have a student, I'm not an O&M, I'm working to get my TVI certification, but I was talking with a student who's in 10th grade and, you know, just discussing different options for when he gets older, and he has no desire, you know, to be independent in any aspect, but he's very capable.
And how is he getting around now?
His parents.
And are they, if you've had conversation with them on, can we work on increasing his independence in this area, or they aren't supporting that.
They're not ready to support that yet.
Support that.
They're kind of, scared, I guess, due to safety reasons, but he's, he'd be a good traveler eventually if he had the desire to be.
And I think it's just looking for that, trying to envision the future. Is he looking to be college ready or go into work? It'll be a job.
He's kind of unmotivated in all aspects of life.
All aspects.
So probably, join the workforce is where he will go, but there's potential for college in his future.
Is he somebody who you think would be a low vision driver, whether bioptic or not, or
Possibly.
not enough vision?
He does have enough vision. I think he would qualify, but no motivation at this point in time.
And that's, I'm seeing more and more with our students who are on campus or come from across the state, that they don't, until they hit that like 24 years old, they may not pursue the driving. They're relying on friends who they ride with, or parents continue to do that. And I think until that just wears thin, if the parents are not willing to be a part of increasing that independence, or not open to it right now, I think opening that topic of what if you wanted to, what is a motivating activity that he would want to get to, where it's, let's do a hypothetical. It's not you, but hypothetically, how would you, what ideas would you have for another teenager getting there? So it's at least exposing him to it. Same as with optical devices. My job is to make sure you're building proficiency with it. Forcing you to use it, I cannot do, but I can expand your awareness of what's out there. And that's in little steps. And maybe it helps him become more motivated. Transportation options for active travelers. So I think most of these we've talked about, the whether walking or biking, and I think of that as personal travel, in that I'm in charge. I decide if I'm hopping on my bike. Rides from family and friends, hired driver, and I'm going to talk a little about actually printing out or writing up a contract. Taxis, we're seeing less of them, but in different sizes of cities, they are still there. Rideshare, mass transit, and I don't have paratransit on here because all of these that are listed is you don't have to apply, where in paratransit you have to get accepted onto the paratransit list. And so I know that is an option, but I haven't included it in this. And in thinking of all of these, when I have gotten into discussion with people in rural areas, and I have lived rural when I was teaching in Kansas. And I think walking and biking, where we are epidemically a less and less healthy nation with physical activity. And that's why I have been so pleased that more walkable cities, and I have in the resources and an organization that I have become almost addicted to following, called America Walks. And they do monthly webinars that are so focused on safe, accessible, walkable communities of any size, where they're looking at what are projects that are happening around the nation that are helping people be outside and walk in your neighborhood, walk to the grocery store and get groceries on occasion, where we're doing less of the hop in the car. So I think with rural communities, walking and biking, arranging rides, whether it's a bartering system where you're negotiating for what's the exchange, or hiring a driver. And I have slides on each of these. So I think even in rural areas, those three, that's plan A, B, and C, where larger communities are going to have more of these available on the list. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but it presents what I want to say, the positives, the pros on the left side of the screen, with the counterbalance of the negatives. When either I'm walking or biking, I do have that freedom. I determine. I'm not relying on the bus driver or the friend to show up who I've arranged a ride with, or the Lyft driver to get to me. It's my choice. Minimal cost, greatest health benefit. And in some parts of the city, I can outpace traffic with walking and biking. It can be more time consuming. Subject to weather, where not all days am I going to be a walker or biker. And I loved this quote at the bottom. There is no such thing as bad weather, only unsuitable clothing. And that's one of those critical thinking skills for our students. Check the weather. That is just part of your routine when you're looking ahead at the next day. How am I going to get around? Because with all my experience in this, I can still leave the house. Oh, there's just a few clouds. It's not going to be that bad. I head out to the grocery store and I come back dripping wet because I just didn't throw the umbrella in. So checking your own weather on that is important. Definitely, I know for students, and I'll ask them this, where you live and where you work or are going to school is going to determine your most used modes of transportation. I put myself on close to a bus route because that is my most routine option. If I am going to barter for rides with a particular friend, I want to live, and we've agreed on this setup. I either work or home is going to be closer to that person. So looking at choice of residence is part of this. Rides from family and friends, there is that feeling of safety. I know this person. Hopefully there's the ability to negotiate, and that should be part of it, because it should not be on a favor basis. If we have a swap system set up, negotiating, I'll pay in tech support or childcare or yard work for this amount of transportation, then I should be able to help negotiate the schedule. Then again, that space to store purchases. So if we're heading out on a number of errands, it's way easier than bringing a bunch of bags onto the bus. And I purposely, on the negative side, use that word sense of being a burden. That is a really bad trap to get into, and it can come out in either very direct or subtle ways. And I really want students to start taking charge of, I need to, in some form, pay for this ride. And looking at any of these we haven't covered yet. think most of them we've talked about. I think this, outside of parents, as students move into upper teenage years, friends is more often a route they'll go. And I will hear people, oh, no, you don't need to pay me for that. I don't want to be only on the receiving end. I want to be reciprocating in some way. And when we look at these types of reciprocation, I'll do a kind of questions round with students. Let's make a list. What forms of reciprocation could you do? I think our current era of students are better at tech than many of us adults, whether it's setting up, if you're Roku app on the TV, or different apps on your phone. They have a skill set there. If you bake, if you like being outdoors, walking dogs, yard work, it's just, what are the different ways you can be negotiating rides? And I think that's a very valid, especially in rural areas, can be definitely an option for students, whether it's family or friend. And when with a hired driver, I think that first topic of how do I find a hired driver? I've compared it to I need to get a job. How do I find a job? You tell absolutely everybody you know, because you're gonna get more that way than, is it Indeed that is the current job search site, or it used to be Monster, I think, if I'm remembering the name right. More often jobs are found through somebody you know. And I think more often hiring a driver is found through somebody you know. More people are working at home and have flexible schedules. An older adult in the community who is retired and on Social Security, but still able to drive, it's a win-win with, I get transportation and this older adult gets a little extra in their budget. One of my best drivers was found through, he had been a retired truck driver, and they have organizations for that. And he loved to drive. He, did long road hauling. So I think there are different ways to look at the church bulletin board, where when we're looking at this, when I hire a driver, I'm definitely going to interview that person. It is a door-to-door service. And you can work that into, I want explanation of the travel route that, as we're going. It's very efficient because we get to set up within the contract, what's the flexibility. I can request the route to change, and however payment is based, then that flexibility is built in. And there is that challenge of finding a driver. But I go back to, it is spreading the word, because having a little bit of extra pocket change, you can work out. Typically, there is a higher cost on that because it's both the driver's time that you're taking as well as use of, most often it's that person's vehicle. I knew somebody who did not drive, but had a car and requested that the person drive that car. She trusted her vehicle more. And part of that, I think the factors in writing a contract with the driver, I want to consider their health, or is it a complicated family situation where they get pulled away a lot and aren't able to be a driver. So that first person who says, yeah, I'll let you hire me to drive, may not be your best bet. So looking at are we paying by the hour or by the mile? What's the maximum time to request or cancel a trip. Additional considerations. Will you haul heavy items for me? I remember needing a screen door at one point and knowing I couldn't get it in, rideshare wasn't available. So taxi was the option. I was new in a community. So that was the ability to do that. Checking the driver's background, because reported accidents, I believe, is public record. And I want to make sure they're a safe driver and the vehicle is in good condition. So you're asking some important, people may feel like that's personal, but if I am hiring you to be my driver, that's within my responsibilities to check this. And then available hours for driving. Not past 9 o'clock, then what's my option on getting where I want to go if there's a concert downtown that starts at 9:30? Taxis are still out there. Not all of them are 24/7, depending on the community, but that they still can be. Discount fare, disability vouchers, where it can be more affordable in some cities, that's still an option. Ideally, when I was using taxis more, if I could find the driver that I really connected with, that I felt I trusted the person, sometimes they would share their cell number and I could almost do it on demand. Hey, are you driving today? Where I didn't have to go through dispatch, because a lot of taxi drivers are independent contractors. It's not always through dispatch. And then there can be delays depending on if there is fewer taxi drivers in the city. If that's the system I'm going with, there may not be as many drivers out there. When I was doing it, had a higher cost, I think similar to hiring a driver, because there's a base fare and then there's the ride itself fare. And there's high turnover in taxi drivers. Sometimes may not have good command of English, may not know the community well. So I had to be really responsible with directing how we go and having the self-advocacy to express, I'm not understanding what you're saying. Can you repeat that? Any questions on those so far? We have just a couple of other modes of transportation. Taking the bus. We have seen COVID has really stressed the, I think, transit systems as well, with fewer drivers out there. So any of us on campus who are bus riders did a lot of conversation for the past 6 weeks for how are you navigating this? And it just upped the skills. I had to be more forward thinking. I had to look at the app an hour ahead of time to see, is that my 3:40, it's red line, they've canceled that one, I'm gonna have to wait to 4:10. It was, again, just more critical thinking and planning. But positives I did have liked about the bus is, especially if you are a routine times that you're riding, you develop a community. There are, hey, how are you doing today? You recognize a certain person on the bus or a driver that is always on that route. And it can be a positive sense of community. When I say there's a fixed schedule that's helpful in trip planning, ideally there is. It is very affordable, and I think almost all buses have a disability card, which even walking the student through that process, visiting the transit center, how does that work? How much ahead of time do you have to get your eye doctor to fill out the form that says, yes, I have a visual impairment, that puts me in that category of getting the discounted bus pass. I am a paying passenger receiving a service, and I can definitely tell you Cap Metro is our transit system in Austin, and I have their phone number memorized. And I will call if there has been a significant issue, and I call when I have seen a driver do a significantly positive job in their role, being really helpful to passengers. We have a new soccer stadium, major soccer stadium built on my route home. And the bus driver one Saturday was telling everybody on the bus, everybody avoid this area from 3 to 5, because that's when all the traffic is going to be crunching on that road. And what a tremendously helpful thing to tell all your passengers. And I got a phone call, or I called the company and said, this driver did a great job. So I want students to recognize this is a service that you are part of developing it and helping it to be a better service. Some of the negatives on riding the bus, that calculating in, it takes me 7 minutes to walk from my front door to the bus stop where I catch my morning commute. And getting, if I'm carrying bags, groceries, predicting along the route, when is it? It's got to be at the end of the day that I'm acquiring all of those extra items that I'm carrying. Let's see, walking between stops, I covered that. And then that frustration when the bus gets delayed. What am I doing with my wait time? Or have I figured out a backup plan? And then looking at commercial bus lines, Mega Greyhound is still doing a lot of the more rural routes where Megabus, I think of it as from college to college. I see a lot of college students when I'm riding Megabus. Larger cities, but tremendously affordable if you know weeks ahead that you want to book a trip. Greyhound does travel to lots of cities. It's more affordable than an airline or hired driver. They do have specific services for a passenger with disabilities, and it can be an appealing thing to travel at, I say, at ground level at an unhurried pace, when you are literally watching the landscape roll by. I did a Megabus route from Atlanta to Cincinnati one day 2 years ago in the summer. I paid the $3 extra for the top tier, the second level, and the panoramic window. And I can remember going through that tip of West Virginia, and it was, to this day, just an incredible trip. $10 to get from Atlanta to Cincinnati. Yes, it took more than 6 hours. And yes, finding the Megabus in Atlanta at the Atlanta train station outside of the airport was stressful. But the balancing it all out, it can be a way to see the country. And I think small trips lead to big trips. I remember my first Greyhound ride. That was definitely an option I had, even in rural areas of Kansas. And I did not do an overnight trip on Greyhound for at least more than a year, I had to work up to that. And I think that can be true for our students. And hopefully they can find an adult, whether a parent, a family member, a good neighbor, to do that with them, to kind of have a traveling together before I do it solo. And I've made the, I'll get asked in conferences, whether with students or with parents, but it's not Greyhound, it's just unsafe, or the bus, you know, and they'll literally say there's scary people on the bus. There are scary people at the mall, and we teach our kids how to be safe in the mall. And I think the reputation of it's dirty or unsafe is more a negative reputation than reality. The person who asked about just like that common sense of getting in a ride share. Yes, because the app will show you the license plate number, which is easier for me to check than the make and the model of the car, because I don't know that about cars. I'll open the door and I don't get in. I ask the name of the driver before I get in. And I have my phone on and I'm following the route as that rideshare driver is going. And especially if I'm in a new area, I'll have somebody on the other, let somebody know that, yes, I'm taking Lyft and I should be at your house, because I've texted them, hey, it says we're arriving at 5:17. So just a heads up on that.
Hey, Cindy, I just wanted to let you know, you got a comment in the chat that says, I'm glad you put in a plug for both the bus and the train. People don't often think of these options right away, but they're actually really great. And planes are actually awful right now.
Planes are awful. I was listening to a podcast on talking to strangers and the anger issues that come in travel, how we connect with strangers. And he made that example. The plane is the worst way to travel. You're cramped. There can be so many negatives. And two, we have moved away in this country from trains and buses. We are a car driving nation, and tons of funding has gone to the highways and not maintaining infrastructure within our neighborhoods and our communities. And there is a real push. America Walks is the organization that has helped educate me on that is us telling our representatives, I want sidewalks in my neighborhood. I want more safer outdoor areas for us to be using in our cities. Dr. Ann Korn and Penny Rosenblum, both retired. This is the second edition of Finding Wheels. And the first one came out when I first started doing these presentations. So that looking at multiple modes of travel, chapters in their book are dedicated to those multiple modes of travel. And I think this is such a student-friendly, family-friendly, rich with lessons book on how do I do this? How do I develop the skills? How do I build my independence with being an active traveler? Another resource that I hadn't thought about in a long time, and I think it can be a tough topic, is that Safe Without Sight. And I look at the year that this came out, more than 20 years ago, but very practical. And it was written, the three people worked in the field. I'm trying to remember each of their roles. The subtitle, Crime Prevention and Self-Defense Strategies for People Who Are Blind. And I think these apply to anybody who's an active traveler. Doing it safely and recognizing how do you handle self-defense. I think it is a delicate topic to bring up, but I think it's important. And this book for me was a way to kind of help broaden the conversation starters on that.
Cindy, you've got a comment that Scott McCall was director of the Center for the Visually Impaired in Atlanta.
In Atlanta, I didn't, okay, I did, thank you, I didn't remember that. They kind of came together as a group. I don't know what they were working on, some kind of a workshop. And then we need to put a book out on this, if I remember it right. So there is one more poll question. Which mode of transportation would you most likely want to focus on in future lessons with a student? And I think each of these can be considered routine, almost daily forms of transportation. And big plug for the city bus. And I know lots of communities. I can even say my hometown of Salina, Kansas, 45,000 people finally got a city bus. It is not just the large cities. Lots of grants. I think with our aging population and people who are having to give up the car keys, those older adults, it is pushing that forward. And I'm pleased for that. More people kind of adapting our lifestyle to. Tessa, I'd let you talk about how you have handled in a city like Pittsburgh. How am I trying to bring in more active transportation in your life when you're a driver? Because I want our students to see that.
Yeah, Cindy and I talk about that quite a bit. There's pros and cons to every system.
But if you can, you hop on the bike.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so like if we share season baseball tickets, and whenever those games are downtown, and we always ride our bikes when we go to games because it's so nice. You don't have to pay exorbitant parking rates, they've just in this little downtown area close to where we live put in, because we live in sort of just outside the city in a little suburban area, but they just put in a new little place that we like to go for happy hour because we can get there very easily on the bus, and they have ice cream for our son. So it's responsible that we're not having a cocktail and then heading in the car too. So one more plug for the bus.
I think, the phrase has become more popular, Meatless Monday, where more people are, let's just look at one day a week doing a plant-based option. And that's where, for me, this topic has really become more energized with the critical need in our climate of jumping in the car is not the only option, and feeling pride in that yes, I'm using the bus, but there are 18 people on that one vehicle. So if I'm looking at it that way. So it looked like using the bus got high marks.
Yeah, 100% of the votes.
I'm surprised because I know buses are not available in all cities, but even the comms I think sometimes you'll set up that trip where we are going to take a Thursday afternoon, a very extended lesson, go down to San Antonio, or if they are outside of that area, and we're going to get familiar with the bus system in San Antonio. So kind of in summary, I want that thinking about, I think, the big topics, discussions on goal setting for trips and what are the transportation needs, building awareness of that individual traveler. What is my skill set? Where are my strong areas and then my weaker areas? And starting practice trips to build my confidence with it. having familiarity with transportation options, because even in rural areas, I think it is not as often recognized that there are options. And then what is my responsibility as an active traveler? I have my contact information down there. And then the resources I wanted to point out. I had done a couple of articles in Albinism Insight that talked about that. You can have a positive perspective on this. And how do we start building that early traveler skills? And that blind traveler network link, friend who is blind provided that. I was not aware of it. It is still active. I think not all of the tabs, I'm not sure who's monitoring. It had been through the San Francisco Lighthouse, but this is for like those big bucket list trips that I think that is a great example of people who are doing this efficiently want to talk about it. They want to share what they've learned. So that was a new find for me. And then the America Walks webinar. So many different topics. They have archived their recorded webinars that just look at this accessible, safe, walkable communities, and want to see it as this is all of us have a role in making that possible in wherever we live. It's a grassroots movement, I think, and I find those very energizing. So very close to 6:30 for you guys. Any remaining one or two last questions?
I think we have just like time for maybe one more, and then I'll give the closing code and stuff.
I'm happy to, my email is on there, visit further if somebody felt like I didn't get my question answered, or I have a particular student. I have done this more often with students with low vision, but have also worked with students who are blind or have additional disabilities.